The crystalline walls of the Zephyrian Academy's examination hall gleamed under the artificial suns, casting rainbow patterns across the nervous faces of students from 12 different species. Fiza adjusted her translator earpiece and glanced at the empty seat beside her where James should have been sitting. The human was late again, which wasn't unusual, but today it might cost him everything. Professor Vexhai, a tall, mantis-like creature with compound eyes that could detect the slightest movement, clicked his mandibles impatiently. Students, today's final examination will determine your placement in the Galactic Diplomatic Corps. As you know, we have implemented new anti-cheating measures. A collective shiver ran through the hall. Everyone had heard rumors about the Catherian Mindreader beast, a creature capable of detecting dishonest thoughts from across a star system. The Academy had acquired one specifically for high-stakes examinations after a scandal involving telepathic students from the Proxima system. The examination will commence once our security measure arrives, Professor Vexhai announced, his voice carrying an undertone of satisfaction that made Fiza's skin crawl. The massive doors at the back of the hall groaned open, and a team of handlers entered, leading something that made even the most confident students lean back in their seats. The Mindreader beast was roughly the size of a small shuttle, with iridescent scales that shifted colors based on the emotions it detected. 6 intelligent eyes, each the size of a dinner plate, swept across the room while tentacle-like appendages tasted the psychic atmosphere. Fiza had studied these creatures during her xenobiology courses. They were among the most feared beings in known space, not because they were violent, but because they could peer directly into the deepest thoughts of any sentient being. No lie could hide from them, no deception could survive their scrutiny. The beast moved forward, its eyes beginning to glow with a soft blue light as it prepared to scan the students. But then, without warning, it stopped dead in its tracks. The glow faded from its eyes and it began to back away from the examination area, making low, distressed sounds. "What is the meaning of this?" Professor Vexhai demanded, turning to the chief handler, a stocky Taraxian with 4 arms and a perpetually worried expression. I don't understand," the handler stammered, all 4 hands gesturing frantically at the retreating beast. "It's never done this before. The creature seems to be afraid of something in this room." The Mindreader beast continued backing away, its scales now cycling rapidly through deep purples and blacks, colors that xenobiologists associated with terror and confusion. Its eyes darted around the room, searching for something, until they fixed on the entrance doors. At that moment, James burst through the doors, slightly out of breath and carrying a steaming cup of that terrible earth beverage he called coffee. His brown hair was messy, his academy uniform wrinkled, and he looked completely oblivious to the chaos his arrival had caused. "Sorry I'm late, Professor," James said cheerfully, making his way toward his seat next to Fiza. "The food synthesizer was acting up again and I had to manually brew this." He stopped mid-sentence, noticing that every eye in the room was fixed on him. The Mindreader beast, meanwhile, had pressed itself against the far wall and was making increasingly distressed noises. "James," Fiza whispered, "I think there's a problem." Professor Vexhai's compound eyes focused on the human with laser-like intensity. "Mr. James, perhaps you could explain why our security measure refuses to function in your presence." James looked genuinely confused. He glanced at the cowering creature, then back at the professor. "I have no idea. Maybe it's allergic." "To caffeine?" One of the handlers approached the beast cautiously, placing a sensing device against its scales. After a moment, he looked up with an expression of absolute bewilderment. "Professor," the handler called out, "according to our instruments, the creature is detecting something it's never encountered before. The readings are unprecedented." "What kind of readings?" Professor Vexhai demanded. "It's reading a mind that appears to be completely honest. Not just honest about the current situation, but honest about everything. No hidden agendas, no concealed thoughts, no mental barriers or deceptions of any kind. The creature doesn't know how to process it." The hall fell silent except for the Mindreader beast's continued whimpering. Professor Vexhai slowly approached James, studying him with newfound interest. "Mr. James," the professor said carefully, "are you aware of any unusual mental characteristics you might possess?" James shrugged, taking a sip of his coffee. "Not really. I mean, my grandmother always said I was a terrible liar, but I figured that was normal for humans." "Terrible how?" Fiza asked, leaning forward with scientific curiosity. "Well, I can't really do it," James admitted. "Whenever I try to lie or be deceptive, I just feel awful. It's easier to just tell the truth about everything, even when it gets me in trouble." The Taraxian handler looked up from his instruments again. "Professor, the creature is now registering what appears to be complete psychological transparency. It's as if this human's mind has no capacity for deception whatsoever." Professor Vexhai's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Fascinating. In all our studies of human psychology, we've never encountered this phenomenon." "It's not just me," James said helpfully. "Most humans are like this, actually. We're just really bad at lying to each other, which is why we developed all these social rules about honesty and trust. My parents always taught me that lying makes everything more complicated than it needs to be." The Mindreader beast had now curled into what could only be described as a fetal position, completely overwhelmed by the concept of a mind with no hidden layers, no secret thoughts, no deceptive intentions. Professor Vexhai looked around the hall, then made a decision that would be talked about in academy circles for years to come. "It appears," he announced, "that the presence of a completely honest mind has rendered our anti-cheating measure inoperable. However, I believe we've discovered something far more valuable than any examination could provide." He turned to address the class. "Students, you are witnessing a demonstration of why humans have become such effective diplomats throughout the galaxy. Their fundamental psychological inability to maintain complex deceptions makes them uniquely trustworthy in interspecies negotiations." James looked embarrassed by the attention. "We just think lying is too much work," he said simply. "Truth is way easier to keep track of." The examination proceeded without the Mindreader beast, but nobody in that hall would forget the day they learned why human diplomats were so sought after throughout the galaxy. It wasn't because they were clever or manipulative. It was because they were incapable of being anything other than genuine. As Fiza later wrote in her report to the Galactic Diplomatic Corps, "Humans may not be the smartest or strongest species in the galaxy, but they possess something far more valuable, a species-wide allergy to dishonesty that makes them the most trusted negotiators in known space." The Mindreader beast, meanwhile, requested immediate transfer to a different sector, claiming it needed time to recover from the existential crisis of encountering a mind that contained exactly what it appeared to contain. Nothing more, nothing less, nothing hidden. Just truth.